Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about the 1973 independent crime thriller, I guess you'd call it, Country Blue. And in Country Blue, we meet Bobby Lee Dixon. Despite being freshly released from prison for armed robbery of a convenience store, Bobby Lee seems to have more or less landed on his feet. He scored a job as an auto mechanic, and he's begun a romantic relationship with Ruthie, who is the daughter of his boss. So he's got a job, he's got a girlfriend. His girlfriend is going to inherit a business in the future. So it seems like, with a little patience, he could end up having a pretty decent little life there. But patience, it seems, is not among Bobby Lee's virtues. He wants the good life. He wants it now, and he clearly thinks the world ought to give it to him. Rather than appreciate what he's got and try to build on that, he hatches a plan to rob a bank and abscond to Mexico with Ruthie. This is the first bad decision in a series of bad decisions, good judgment also not being one of Bobby Lee's virtues, that will escalate the risks for the young couple and the consequences they're going to face if and when the law catches up with them. So that's, in a nutshell, the plot of Country Blue. Now, as I mentioned, it's an independent film from the 1970s, and unless you're even older than I am, you've probably not heard of anyone in it. But at the time it came out, the most recognisable name was that of Dub Taylor, who does indeed get first billing on this poster. He plays the mechanic for whom Bobby Lee works. And in 1973, he was 35 years into what would ultimately be a career that stretched over 7 decades, from the 1930s all the way through to the 1990s. He's clearly a cut above the rest of the cast of this odd little movie. Just a different kind of quality of actor, frankly, compared to everybody else. But let's dive into what's interesting about Country Blue, and there are a few things. So let's start with something the film does well: atmosphere. Country Blue does a good job of capturing the sweltering, sweaty, humid heat of America's Deep South. One of its key techniques for doing so seems to be the use of what looks like documentary-style footage depicting real people doing real things. The opening sequence, for instance, appears to have been filmed at some sort of country fair. Presumably the people depicted on screen were aware that they were being filmed and why, or at least had been given notice of that and then allowed to forget, because their behaviour seems very natural. They don't engage with the camera at all. They're going about their business doing country fair things, and not acting like people who aren't actors do when they're on camera, which is like to look at the camera and be self-conscious. So that documentary style look and feel does help with the atmosphere of the film. It also helps that the film makes little apparent effort to have its cast look cool, calm, or collected. People's clothes are often rumpled or grubby, and they look sweaty and uncomfortable in the heat. Having spent some 30 years of my life living in a similar climate, I can certainly sympathise with that feeling. I have spent a considerable amount of my time feeling rumpled, grubby and sweaty and uncomfortable, living in hot, humid climate. So yeah, atmosphere is something the film does manage to convey quite well. Unfortunately, that's far from enough to cover for its significant weaknesses, so let's talk about some of those. The biggest of them is Bobby Lee. This is very much his story. I mean, sure, Ruthie is along for a lot of it, and some of the advertising at the time seems to focus more on her than on him, but she's a very passive presence in this film. While she does criticise some of Bobby Lee's dumber decisions, and boy, he makes a lot of them, she never actually takes any action to make him change course. So much of the film's success or failure, and honestly, it's the latter, depends on how we react to Bobby Lee, and there's a big problem there, because the film seems to want us to react to him in ways that it simply doesn't actually deliver on or support. For instance, take a look at the tagline on the poster here. Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. But Bobby Lee and Ruthie don't have nothing left to lose. They have a livelihood and real prospects for the future. They, or at least Bobby Lee, just aren't willing to wait for those prospects to eventuate. Bobby Lee isn't willing to wait. Ruthie doesn't stop him and make him. Bobby Lee wants a big score now, and then to never have to work again. And hey, like, a movie where Bobby Lee is an anti-hero or even an outright villain could work. If he was darkly charismatic and the film, really led into that idea of him leading the naive and loving Ruthie into a dangerous path, that could work. But you'd probably also then need to change the script and also the actor. Bobby Lee is played by the film's writer and director and producer and editor, I believe, in his only on-screen credit. And he just, he doesn't have the charisma to carry off that kind of role. And you'd also probably need to, as I said, rewrite the script to make Bobby Lee less rash and impulsive and functionally, he's his own worst enemy in this film. He consistently does counterproductive things, and I'm really not sure how the film intends us to like him or care about him, given how selfish and self-destructive he is. Finally, this is a slow-paced film. It is a 1970s indie film. Presumably money was pretty tight. There was a limit to what they could do. Taking this slower pace does tie into the oppressive atmosphere the film generates, but it also contributes to making it rather a slog to watch it. The film is also filled with rather sour and dour characters. Bobby Lee sees only the things he doesn't have, not those that he does. And he's utterly blind to his own role in the disappointments of his life. He's crude, he's selfish, he's quick to anger, he's overly convinced of his own importance. He's a white man after all. And he's convinced that the world owes him an easy living. And the film's tone is as dour as that of its characters. The plot is something of a slow-motion car crash as Bobby Lee's decisions and Ruthie's passive complicity in them leads the pair into a worse and worse situation. I do wonder if the story is conceived of as a modern-day Bonnie and Clyde or inspired by Bonnie and Clyde. You've got the same basic storyline here. You've got a convicted robber who meets a young woman and leads her into joining him in a crime spree. And just like the real-life Bonnie Parker, Ruthie is, in actuality, married to another man, though they're separated when she meets up with and falls in love with Bobby Lee. On the flip side of that, though, the real-life Bonnie Parker seems to have been a much more active participant in Clive Barrow's activities than Ruthie is in Bobby Lee's. And, Bonnie and Clyde were much more successful. Their crime spree lasted a couple of years. Ruthie and Bobby Lee manage a couple of days at best. And ultimately, if you want to watch the Bonnie and Clyde story, there are multiple film and TV adaptations. You've got better options available to you. I don't see that there's much point seeking out Country Blue for the purposes of watching this particular storyline. So that is Country Blue. Next time, we're going to stay in the Bayou with Roger Corman's 1959 offering Swamp Women. So that's next time. In the meantime, thanks for watching this. Hope you enjoyed it. And come back for Swamp Women.